The silence she hid behind lights were too bright, the cameras were too close. The questions kept coming like waves, loud, impatient, and always for someone else. Ana de Armas sat quietly in the middle of the press panel. Her dress was elegant, her smile practiced, but her eyes kept drifting to the floor. No one noticed her. It was the biggest film release of the year. The cast was full of stars, and everyone wanted a piece of them, especially the men. Interview after interview, the reporters asked the same questions to the same people. The lead actor beside her, the older star to her left, and of course, Keanu Reeves. Keanu answered with his usual calm voice, thoughtful words, and kind eyes. But every time Ana leaned forward to speak, the mic shifted away. Every time she started to smile, someone else jumped in. And slowly, she shrank. She had worked hard for this role. She had trained, rehearsed, stayed up nights to perfect every line. But now, in front of the world, it felt like she didn't matter. Like she was invisible. There was a moment. Deep into the third interview of the day, when she tried to speak about her character's emotional journey, a rare question had come her way. She opened her mouth, started softly. "I think what she's really feeling is," but the reporter cut her off. "Keanu, how did you prepare for your fight scenes?" Keanu blinked. Slowly, Ana looked down. The smile on her lips froze. She nodded like it was okay. But something inside her folded inward. Keanu looked at her. Not in a loud way, not in a dramatic gesture, just a glance. But his eyes had seen everything. He didn't answer the question. Instead, he turned slightly toward Ana and said, "Can we go back to what Ana was saying?" The room fell quiet. The reporter looked confused. Ana looked up. Keanu nodded gently at her. "Please continue," he said. Ana's breath caught in her throat. No one had ever done that for her on camera. No one had given her that space. She spoke. This time her voice was clearer. She talked about vulnerability, about strength, about how her character didn't just exist to support the male lead. The silence around her changed. It was no longer heavy, that was listening. When the interview ended, Ana stood to leave, but the reporters swarmed Keanu again. She stepped aside, used to it now. But as she turned, she felt something. Warm fingers wrapped gently around hers. She looked down. Keanu had reached out and taken her hand. He didn't say anything. He just stood beside her, hand in hand, in front of the cameras. In front of the world, not to make a scene. Not to steal attention, but to say she matters. She deserves to be seen. Ana didn't cry. But her eyes sparkled in a way that made the lights around them dim in comparison. And in that quiet moment, thousands of people watching the interview at home finally saw what they had missed. Not a rising star, a woman already shining. The whispers behind the curtained clip of Keanu holding Ana's hand spread fast. It wasn't loud, it wasn't dramatic, but it felt different, real. Within hours, fans shared it online with quiet captions like, "This is how you show respect." Or, "He saw her." Ana didn't say much about it. She never did. She had learned long ago that silence could protect you. But inside, something had changed. They were on their way to the next event, now an international premiere in Paris. The whole cast was flying together, but on the plane, the mood was the same. Loud jokes, industry talk, or quietly sitting. By the window, watching the clouds, Keanu sat across the aisle. When the others got louder, his eyes often drifted her way, not with pity, but with calm awareness. At the hotel in Paris, Ana was the last one to check in. The staff had misplaced her booking. "Sorry, miss, your room isn't ready yet." The manager said politely, but without care. She gave a small nod and stepped aside. It wasn't the first time. She dealt with worse. But then, Keanu appeared. "Beside her, you can take mine," he said gently. Double quotes. "No, Keanu," she replied quickly. "It's fine," but he didn't argue. He just handed his key to the manager and said, "Please make sure she's comfortable. I'll wait." Ana looked at him for a long second. He wasn't doing it for show. There were no cameras here. No audience, just respect. That evening at the red carpet event, photographers lined the streets like wolves. Flashes exploded like tiny stars. Keanu arrived first. As always, the cameras loved him. instead of posing alone, he looked behind. Him extended his hand. Anna stepped out of the car slowly. This time, she didn't feel small. He held her hand again, just like before. But this time, when they walked down the carpet, something strange happened. The cameras pointed at her too. The reporters asked her questions, real ones, about her work, ideas, her growth as an actress, and she answered with calm strength. Later that night, after the event, the cast gathered. For dinner, laughter filled the table. But there was a moment when one actor, half drunk and too comfortable, said something careless. He looked at Anna and joked, "You should thank Keanu. He saved your career this week." The table laughed. Anna froze. The words hit harder than they should have. But before she could respond, Keanu stood up, calm but serious. "She didn't need saving," he said clearly. "She just needed space. To be seen." The table went quiet. No one laughed after that. Anna didn't speak. She didn't need to, because this time, someone had said what she had always wanted to say. And more importantly, he meant it. As they left the restaurant that night, Anna turned to Keanu and said softly, "Why do you do that?" He looked at her. With that same quiet smile, "Because the world doesn't always notice good people," he said. "But it should." Anna walked beside him in silence. Not because she had nothing to say, but because, for the first time in a long time, she finally felt heard. The voice she almost lost next day began like most others: call sheets, makeup chairs, and a long list of media appearances. Paris had woken up to headlines filled with pictures of Keanu and Anna. But this time, something was different. Focus wasn't just on their looks, it was on their bond. Their respect. Anna read the articles quietly on her phone in the corner of the dressing room. Most of them praised Keanu. A few mentioned her grace. But none truly understood how much those quiet moments had meant, until one article changed everything. It was written by a woman, an older journalist who had once been ignored at press tables too. She wrote, "Keanu didn't just give Anna his hand, gave her the microphone the world had taken from her." Anna's fingers trembled as she scrolled through the words. This time, someone really saw her. But with the attention came pressure. More reporters, more cameras. And behind the lights, whispers that cut deeper than they showed. "She's only trending because of Keanu. He's protecting her too much. Maybe she can't stand on her own." Anna heard these things. Sometimes in passing, sometimes from people she trusted. It was during a live panel that it finally broke. A well-known host, trying to stir drama for ratings, smiled as she turned to Anna. "Anna, people say you're being carried by Keanu's kindness. Do you think you deserve this spotlight?" The room froze. Anna opened her mouth to speak, but nothing came. Her throat tightened. Her heart raced. Memories of being overlooked, dismissed, forgotten all came rushing back just then. Keanu turned to the host. His voice was calm, low, but filled with quiet fire. "Do you think kindness is a weakness?" he asked. The host blinked. "Excuse me, because if you do," Keanu continued, "then maybe you're the one who shouldn't be asking questions." The audience clapped. But it wasn't loud at first, but it grew. And as the clapping rose, Anna found her voice again. She looked at the host, her tone soft but steady. "I'm proud of my work," she said, "and I'm lucky to have someone beside me who reminds the world that it's okay to be kind." That night, she walked out of the building alone. Keanu was still inside, finishing interviews. She stepped into the cold air, her breath visible under the Paris sky. A fan stood nearby, holding a small notebook. "Miss Anna," the girl said shyly, "can I ask you something?" Anna smiled. "Of course. How do you stay calm when people try to make you feel small?" Anna knelt slightly, so she could meet the girl's eyes. "By remembering," she said gently, "that their voices are not louder than my truth." The girl smiled, and for the first time, Anna felt something lift from her chest. Not because the world had changed, but because she had. The night of No Chimera's tour moved on. Now they were in Berlin, another city, another crowd. But something had shifted, not just around Anna, but within her. She no longer walked 3 steps behind. She stood beside Keanu in every photo. answered questions without hesitation. Her voice, once soft and uncertain, now carried a quiet strength. But with every new step forward, new pressure followed. Her manager warned her gently. The internet loves a story, Anna, but it's temporary. You have to be more than the girl beside Keanu. Anna nodded, but the words sat heavy in her mind. Was that how people saw her? A shadow next to a kind man? That evening, there were no interviews, no events. For once, the schedule was empty. Anna sat alone in the hotel's quiet courtyard, surrounded by dim lights and ivy-covered walls. Her hair was loose, her dress simple. She wasn't performing anymore. Then she heard footsteps. Keanu, he sat beside her without a word. For a while, they both stared at the sky. Silence filled the space between them, not awkward. Just real, finally, Anna asked. Do you ever feel tired of being strong for other people? Keanu looked at her with those calm eyes. All the time, he said, but I'm not always strong. Sometimes I'm just present. Anna turned to him. Why do you care so much? He smiled gently. 'Cause I've been the quiet one in the room, too. I know how loud that silence can be. She felt her chest tighten. It's not with pain, but with something softer recognition, they think. I'm lucky to be next to you, she whispered. But you're the one reminding me who I am. Keanu shook his head slowly. You already knew, he said. You just forgot for a moment. I'm just here to remind you to remember. Pause. The wind rustled the leaves gently. Anna, he said, his voice low and honest, the world will keep trying to define you. But they don't get to write your story. You do. She looked at him then, really looked, and something inside her shifted. Thank you, she said softly. Keanu reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small, folded paper. A fan gave me this in Paris, he said. But I think it's for you. Anna opened it carefully. It was a handwritten note that said, I wanted to give up. But then I saw how you held your head high when the world didn't clap. Thank you for not giving up. Her eyes welled up. No stage, no cameras, no press. Just truth. Anna leaned back in her chair, her heart full and quiet. Because tonight wasn't about fame or attention. Tonight was about remembering who she was before the silence, before the doubts, before the spotlight. A woman who deserved to be heard, and who no longer needed permission to speak. The night everything changeth. Next morning began like the others, flashing cameras, shouting fans, 1,000 questions thrown in the air like confetti. But something had shifted again. This time, it wasn't just the media watching Innate. It was the world. Her answers were now quoted in articles. Her interviews shared online. Fans from around the globe began calling her an icon of quiet strength. But not everyone was happy about that. During a live panel in London, the moderator, known for pushing limits, decided to stir tension. Anna, he said with a half-smile, some people say you're only being praised now because of your friendship with Keanu. What would you say to that? Anna glanced at the crowd. Some leaned forward, some smirked. She saw a few cameras zoom in, waiting for a reaction. Keanu looked at her from across the table, ready to speak, but she lifted her hand slightly just. Enough to say, I got this. Then she turned to the moderator, her voice steady, warm, and firm. I'm not here to argue with opinions, she said. But I know my worth. I've worked for every role. I've stayed up learning lines, crying over scenes, studying emotions. If people didn't notice before, it's not because I wasn't shining. It's because they weren't looking. A quiet wave rolled through the audience. Anna continued. And if kindness from a friend helped the world see me, then that says more about him than it does about me. Because real strength doesn't compete, it lifts others. The crowd erupted. Into applause, the moderator nodded, clearly caught off guard. Keanu smiled quietly. Proudly after the panel, Anna walked into the hallway alone. A few young girls ran up to her holding notebooks, their faces glowing with excitement. Can you sign this? One asked. And can we ask something? Anna knelt to their level. Anything? The tallest one asked. How do you not get scared when people try to bring you down? Anna looked at them and said gently, I do get scared. But I remind myself that fear doesn't decide who I am, I do. They smiled. One of them whispered, "You're like a superhero." Anna laughed, not a performance laugh. A real one. Later that evening, something unexpected happened. A well-known magazine contacted her team. They wanted to feature her. Not because of who she was standing next to, but because of who she had become. The title? Ana de Armas, the woman who chose grace when the world chose silence. Ana stared at the email. She thought of her early days, the rejections, the times she was talked over, overlooked, forgotten, and now. But the moment that truly stayed with her didn't come from the headlines. It came from Keanu. He knocked on her door quietly that night, holding a small gift wrapped in brown paper. "You don't have to open it now," he said. "Just something I thought you might like." She opened it anyway. Inside was a notebook, leather-bound, simple. On the first page he had written, "For your words, the world is ready to hear them." Anna blinked back tears. "You always believe in people. Like this?" she asked. Keanu looked at her and said softly, "No, just the ones who forget how powerful they are." The moment they all remember, the final stop of the tour was New York. The biggest stage, the loudest crowd, and the toughest critics. Anna stepped out of the car, dressed not to impress, but to express, her hair tied back, her eyes calm, her presence undeniable. She wasn't just part of the cast anymore. She was part of the conversation. As she walked the red carpet, flash after flash lit the sky like lightning. Reporters called her name now first, not last. "Anna, look here, Anna. How does it feel to be the voice of so many young women? Right now, Anna, who inspires you?" She smiled and answered with grace, but deep inside, she felt something stronger than pride. She felt peace. Keanu arrived a few minutes later. The crowd roared, of course. But instead of rushing ahead, he waited for her. When she reached him, he offered his hand. But this time, she shook her head with a smile. Then she took his arm, not because she needed support, but because they were equals. As they stood in front of the cameras, the crowd behind the barriers began chanting her name. "Anna, Anna, Anna." She blinked. Her lips parted slightly, in disbelief. Keanu leaned closer and said softly, "You hear that? That's you now." The premiere began. The lights dimmed, the movie played. Her performance was emotional, layered, unforgettable. And when the credits rolled, the entire theater stood, a standing ovation. It's not just for the film, but for her. She turned to Keanu, her eyes wet. He didn't clap louder than the others, just nodded once. That was enough. Afterward, during the final press conference, the host asked one last question. "Anna, if you could go back and tell your younger self anything, what would you say?" The room went silent. Anna took a breath. Then she said, "I'd tell her it's okay to feel invisible sometimes. But never let the world define you by the volume of your voice. Kindness is not weakness. The right people will always see you even in silence." The room didn't explode in applause. It paused, because they were truly listening. As the night ended, Keanu and Anna stepped outside together. The streets buzzed with fans and flashing lights, but for a moment, the two of them stood in quiet. "You know," Keanu said gently, "I've done hundreds of interviews, but this one felt different." Anna smiled. "Yes." Because for once, she whispered we weren't just heard, we were understood. He looked at her with the same calm eyes he had offered since day one. "I hope you never stop speaking your truth," he said. "And I hope," she replied, "you never stop reminding people that kindness matters." They walked down the street, not as a headline, not as a trend, but as two people who knew the power of respect, the strength of quiet courage, and the rare beauty of standing up for yourself and for someone else, and somewhere in the world. A young girl watched them on her screen and whispered, "One day, I'll walk beside someone like that. Or better yet, I'll be the one who sees."